Greetings, comrades. And you know what we're going to talk about. You know what time it is. It's time to talk about the American election. Probably going to be the penultimate episode before the American election. But today I feel like I am confident enough to make my big grand predictions. We're going to go state by state and overall who I think is going to win the election. And barring some kind of real October surprise, I'm going to be pretty comfortable in these predictions. But we're going to spend the first part of the episode going over the data we have. I'm going to talk about my predictions. And the next part of the episode, we're going to talk about the things that people have postulated as the October surprise, quote unquote, which I'm sure most of you guys know. October surprise is the political term for every presidential cycle. There's some kind of big thing that happens in October that derails the campaign. I don't think it happens every campaign or even particularly most campaigns in the sense where it really genuinely changes the trajectory of the election. And I certainly don't think we've had anything like that yet. Key phrase being yet. So there's still, I think it's just over 2 weeks, just under 3 weeks before the election. So who knows what can happen, but if things stay the course for these next couple weeks, I'm going to be pretty comfortable in the predictions we set out today. We turn to our benchmark, which is Real Clear Politics. And Real Clear Politics currently has Harris up 1.5% overall. The big thing here is that this is a little bit less than last time I think we checked, and last time I checked personally. If we move down here, we can see, yeah, here we go. Last time we checked, she was just shy of the 2 points mark. She had just started to come down from that. So been a little bit of a tightening going into the final leg of the campaign. This is, of course, very much to be expected. This happens in virtually every, not just American campaign. I've seen virtually every political campaign I've ever seen in my entire life. The polls tighten towards the end. Very common political phenomenon. But unfortunately, it's been going against Harris for the last little bit. Although if we look at the polls here, Harris is doing pretty good overall. Although Trump's got a good result here in the Fox News poll. Wow, tie 50-50, even literally 50-50. That's pretty wild. Then, of course, there are some other ones that have, Rasmussen only has Trump up by 1, which is quite shocking. Usually they have him up by a bigger margin. And personally, my prediction overall for the election is that Harris will win by about 2 points in the popular vote. But of course, the popular vote does not matter in the American election. It is the Electoral College and the key swing states. We're going to, of course, turn to an overall map. And right now, Real Clear Politics has Trump leading in every single swing state. That's pretty wild. What do they have listed as swing states? Are these the same ones that I've listed? Yeah, it's the exact same ones. These are definitely some pretty miserable numbers going into the actual election, having Trump up in every single swing state. That being said, right, these are all within the margin of error. But let's look at some of these. Like Michigan, Trump up by 1. I would be very shocked if Trump wins Michigan. But every single poll here, including Quinnipiac, that's a very, very well-regarded pollster, has Trump by 4. I would genuinely be shocked if he wins again Michigan and if he wins it by this much. But again, in the actual swing states, it's not looking so great, which is part of a little bit of my worry here going into the election. I still think it's going to be a 50-50 overall, but I'm definitely not as confident in the Democrats taking home the White House as I was, say, last time we spoke. Last time we spoke, I gave Harris, I think it was a 65 or 60% chance. The one thing here that's really interesting is they don't have very many recent polls. It's October 17th. As of recording this episode, they have had nothing in the last 3 days. There's only one poll, I guess 2, because Rasmussen starts at the 9th to the 14th. Only 2 polls in Michigan coming into the final stretch of the election. You'd think thered be more. I remember, having followed American politics for a long time, I feel like, especially at this point in the race, you're just like inundated with polls all the time. Everybody's coming out with a poll, but we're not seeing as much of that this time. Let's go see at some of these other states here. Wisconsin, they have Trump up by the smallest, slightest of slivers. And again, it's the same thing. They only have one poll from the last week. So, well, Arizona, same problem. Though this is, I remember this poll here that had everybody freaking out here. The New York Times CNN poll, Trump up by 5 in Arizona. So I feel like I'm looking at this as bad time. I'm almost assured the day after that I close this down, they're going to update with a suite of polls from the last week. So that's where we stand right now for what the data that we have right now is. But again, I would be shocked if Trump wins by these margins in the swing states. Of course, we have people voting already. And the real tough thing, especially now in the modern information age, is I've seen data points supporting and contradicting everything. And they come from all angles. I have seen data points saying that Harris is doing very well in terms of early voting or in terms of mail-in voting. And I've seen polls that show the opposite, that Trump is doing very well in terms of early voting, or at least is doing better than expected in terms of early voting. It's very frustrating trying to make sense of everything that's happening when there's so many contradictory data points, which I think gives a lot of people, including me, the feeling that this election is like, it's a toss-up. It's a toss-up, and it's going to happen in between these tiny margins, in between these, 8 states or 7 states that we have listed as our swing states. The big number that I saw coming out today is that Kamala Harris is doing exceptionally well with white women, who happen to apparently be the largest single demographic within the United States. Increasing your percentage points, a couple percentage points with white women, is going to substantially increase your vote tally overall. And this is something that I have thought will give the Democrats in the election, is the fact that I believe suburban women by and large are going to turn against the Republicans and go for the Democratic Party. And I think that is going to make the difference in this election for Kamala Harris. Well, there's my prediction that I still think Harris is going to win this thing come early November. Of course, then you see on the flip side, she's doing exceptionally poorly with men, poorer than any other Democratic candidate has in modern times. You see some demographics shifting away from the Democratic Party, particularly Hispanics, and some people are talking about African-American males. It'll be interesting to pull those demographics apart when everything is said and done. But when it comes to type of electoral battlegrounds we're talking about now, a lot of people still talk about swing voters, but back in the early 2000s, and of course back in the 90s, when I was not in a very famous TV show, there was a lot of this malleable middle. How can we get as many people towards the middle to come to our side or not? This doesn't really exist anymore. I think in the 21st century, your victory in electoral politics really comes down to 2 things, and maximizing these 2 things. One is energizing your base and driving out turnout among the people who are likely to vote for you in the first place as much as possible. And the second thing is driving out turnout amongst non-voters. Because one of the things that led Trump to victory in 2016 was a large cohort of people who are disengaged politically, didn't really care about electoral politics, very rarely vote. He got a big enough cohort of these people to come and vote for him. This cohort has now become, I think, by and large, returned to political apathy and non-voting. But if you can get these people, and that was one thing I remember in Canadian politics when Justin Trudeau won his majority back in 2015, the Conservative Party here in Canada only lost with like 200,000 votes in terms of raw vote number in comparison to the 2011 campaign where they won a majority. So their vote tally barely changed. What did change was the increase of people showing up to vote in that election. It was a very high turnout election. And a lot of those people who turned out in those high turnout elections were energized by the Trudeau mania at the time. And that's what drove him over the top for his majority. And he hasn't been able to really resurface that since. So he was able to energize this kind of disengaged, politically apathetic cohort, which is now again gone back into the wilderness. If you're able to do that, either drive out turnout within your own base or drive out turnout amongst people who aren't really politically engaged, people who are politically apathetic, because of course the largest block of voters in any democratic system, unless this is like Australia where voting is compulsory, the largest demographic of voters is the non-voting population. And I think that dismissing them is very foolish. It's like dismissing a massive pool of people, because at this point, the voting population, or the likely voting population, pretty polarized and has mostly decided who they're going to vote for. So we're going to go here to 270 to win, which is my favorite map here for playing around with the Electoral College. But before we do that, I'm going to show you my awesome, incredibly awesome swing state chart here that I have laid out. And like I said, I'm going to make my predictions here, and I'm going to put them into this incredibly professional looking chart. And when it comes to actual election day, I would like to announce that I'm going to do one of my very rare live streams. I personally love doing live streams during electoral events. It's fantastic to watch the results come in with everybody. It's a ton of fun, and I can't wait to do it again. The last time I did something like that was, of course, during the midterms, and it was a blast, and it was absolute blast then, and it's going to be even better this time. I've got a lot of crazy stuff hooked up for this election live stream, which is going to, of course, I'm predicting go on forever, because Americans have the eternal election, and we're probably not going to know who wins until December 3rd. Anyway, let's go into my predictions here. And of course, I'm going to take my extremely professional chart and make it even more professional for the live stream itself, so we can actually track how I'm doing in terms of my predictions here, in terms of my guesses. So let's start with the states closest to my head here. We're, of course, going to start with the Sunbelt states. So my personal prediction here going into the Sunbelt states. So my personal prediction looking at the first state here is going to be Nevada. And when it comes to Nevada, I think that the Democrats are going to hold on to this state by the skin of their teeth. However, when it comes to its neighbor here, Arizona, I think that this one is going to flip Republican in 2024. The numbers in this state are not looking very great for the Democrats. I think that they are going to do fine when it comes to the Senate race. And that is going to be, I think, the real deciding factor, is how is the Senate race going to drive turnout when it comes to the actual presidential election. Kari Lake is, of course, extremely unpopular, and she is running for the Senate, and it looks like she's going to lose fairly handily to the Democratic candidate in that state. And the real question will be, is that going to translate over to the presidential suite, and will that actually affect the presidential results? Personally, I think that this is going to be a pickup for Republicans. But again, it's going to be very close. And now we move over to the Rust Belt, which it seems like both campaigns are really treating like this is the entire ball game. They are focusing so many events, specifically Pennsylvania. They're both putting a ton of work, ton of effort into the state. God, I cannot imagine living in Pennsylvania right now. You must see so many political ads. It must make you want to blow your goddamn brains out. But man, it'll all be over soon. Either way, it'll all be over soon. But I think the Democrats are right to put a lot of effort into these states, because I think that they are going to retain all of them. I think the Democrats are going to retain the entire Rust Belt, and that is what's going to be the deciding factor in this election. Of course, if they're going to lose one, I do think it is going to be Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania will probably be the closest one, but Wisconsin is definitely one to look at. There is certainly a reason I think the Democrats in particular are very focused on Pennsylvania, but not so much focused on Wisconsin, because I think they foresee that if they win Pennsylvania, they are probably going to win Wisconsin as well. I could see that actually being a real upset on election night, where the Democrats win Michigan and they win Pennsylvania, but Wisconsin flips red. I don't think that's likely, but I think it's certainly within the realm of possibility. But the more likely scenario, and the scenario to bet on, is, of course, if you win Pennsylvania, the demographics of Pennsylvania are similar enough to Michigan and Wisconsin that you'll probably win those states as well. So as you guys can see, with this setup, the Democrats win here. One thing I want to check out here is, let's say the Republicans win Wisconsin and okay. So yeah, if the Republicans are actually able to flip Wisconsin and Arizona, even if Dems hold on to Nevada, they would still win the White House, assuming they win Georgia and North Carolina. So that could be a real Achilles heel. If there's an Achilles heel within this blue wall strategy, it might be Wisconsin this time, because that is a state that seems to get closer and closer. And to be fair, the Republicans don't really seem to be caring about it either, but neither party is really giving a shit about this state, this electoral cycle, even though it is a very clear swing state. So anyway, with my prediction right here, with the numbers that we have, this gives the Democrats the White House. And now for the final two states here, I do think that the Democrats are going to win one of these two states. The question of which one, it's a toss-up, but I'll make my spicy prediction here. This will probably be my spiciest one, most likely to turn out to be wrong, that I think the Republicans will win Georgia and the Democrats will win North Carolina. And could be a potential a flip there, potential turnabout. Although it's a real wash because both are worth 16 electoral votes. So if the Republicans win Georgia and lose North Carolina, still a wash either way. But that would, of course, put them over the top, giving the Democrats a final tally of 292 votes, give or take one or two electoral votes. Of course, you have a couple states which split their vote, being both Maine and Nebraska. But I don't think the election will be close enough that even if one of these two split states goes one way or the other, it's going to change anything. The real scenario where that could be a real possibility is if the Republicans win Nevada and North Carolina. Like you can see, this brings it right down to an even 270 to 268 for the Democrats. So if one of these two states were to, in that scenario, vote one way or the other, that would be when you have that one electoral vote could decide everything. So anyway, let's just reset the map here. We'll give a final look of what my 2024 electoral map prediction will be. It'll end up being 292 for the Democrats, give or take again those electoral votes in Maine and Nebraska, and 246 for the Republicans. The areas where I'm the least confident in are the Democrats winning Nevada and the Democrats winning North Carolina. But if they do lose both of those states and things stay the way they are, they will win the election by the absolute slimmest of margins, by the absolute skin of their teeth, which I really hope doesn't happen, because that is just a recipe for political instability and disaster if you have this election being decided by a handful of electoral college votes. So please, whatever happens on election night, the one thing is that I hope is that it's decisive, is that there's not a lot of things left up in the air. So when it comes to outcomes, I see Harris victory as the most likely, Trump victory as the second most likely, Harris landslide as the third most likely, and then Trump landslide as a very slim outside possibility. I personally don't consider this a landslide. I don't even know what a landslide is in electoral terms. What was Obama's 2008 victory? Okay, so just so you guys can see here, there we go. Obama got 365 electoral votes. That is the benchmark, I think, for a modern landslide. Say somewhere in that 350 ballpark. That's when you're talking landslide. I don't think we're going to see something like that come November. So finally, I'll just show you my extremely professional chart. As you can see, there we go. This is what I think it's going to end up looking like. Dems winning, obviously, most of the swing states when it's all said and done. So we are going to compare this to what things are going to look like on election night as things unfold. Again, I'm going to be having a live stream and going to have a ton of things planned for you guys. So with the final prediction out of the way, let's talk about some of the mirage October surprises that we have seen so far, and that some people have said, oh, this is the October surprise for sure. The main thing being escalation in the Middle East. There was some escalation that I missed during the last episode, or just after the last episode. And I have learned not to predict extreme disaster anymore after the last time I talked about Middle East escalation. So I'm going to avoid any extreme predictions and focus on what has happened so far. And what has happened so far is that Israel has escalated, I guess you could call it the kind of broader Israel-Hamas war up into Lebanon, because now it's Israel-Hezbollah war. And this kind of escalation had been telegraphed for a while because Hezbollah had been launching rockets into northern Israel, which made the parts of northern Israel they were launching rockets into, you couldn't have any civilians there. All the civilians had to be evacuated. So Israel had been telegraphing some sort of larger action against Hezbollah for quite some time. And of course, the big thing that happened we didn't talk about was like big pager attack. Like they had orchestrated some really, you got to respect the game, no matter, I feel like, how you feel about the conflict. The way Israeli forces had really dismantled Hezbollah, at least early on, had been, at least in terms of military and covert ops, just absolute masterclass. They assassinated their leader when he was in Iran, when he was in another country. Somehow Israel managed to pull that off. And then there's been the pager attack. And I think there's so much misconception about this pager attack because I spent a lot of time looking into this, and it's just super fascinating how they pulled this off, because there's this misconception that they blew up all the pagers across Lebanon, and that's not what happened at all. You can't do that to a pager. A pager battery just can't explode on its own. These batteries had to be manually replaced in every individual pager that was going to blow up. So they could only replace the batteries in, a certain amount of pagers, supposedly those that were deep embedded in Hezbollah supply networks, and then set off a simultaneous command to blow them all up. But anyway, the point being, it's not like if you just had a pager, it was going to explode on you. It had to be specifically replaced by Israeli agent with this battery, which would explode, of course, when being sent a command. Anyway, this eventual escalation resulted in Israel just in the last couple weeks here actually moving into Lebanese territory, moving ground forces into southern Lebanon. And let's see if we can draw some lines on the map here for you guys. So if we move in here, we can see northern Israel and southern Lebanon. But more importantly, Israel has basically said that they are going to move their forces up into this river right here in southern Lebanon and hunker down. And from there, they will be able to effectively disable the rockets which have been fired into northern Israel. This is basically the plan so far. So my point here being is that there isn't a full-scale invasion yet. There certainly could be, but speaking more broadly in terms of American politics, I don't think that most people care about Middle Eastern escalation. To be quite honest, it's unfortunate because it's extremely important. But regardless, right now in the American election, I think Americans are focused towards other things rather than what is happening vis-a-vis Israel and Lebanon. The only time I could see this actually becoming the October surprise, which affects the election, is if Iran gets called into some sort of hot war against Israel. Because at that point, the United States basically said, we're going to back Israel, and you're talking some sort of full-scale war with Iran. That is definitely a game changer. And that can honestly go either way. That could help either the Republicans or the Democrats, because it all depends on how they're able to spin it and who gets blamed and all these other political variables. So I don't think this incursion into Lebanon is going to change the American election. The only way that it may change is in Michigan, where Michigan has a fairly high population of Muslim Americans. And as you guys may know, Muslim Americans, they're not happy with either party right now. And there's a real possibility that they could stay home or vote for a third party. And that is a crucial voting population that Democrats are hoping will help them win a crucial swing state. But if you guys remember, looking back at the UK election, Muslims who lived in Britain were very angry at Labour for their pretty much vehement support of Israel. So they had a very disciplined vote, and in many cases voting in pro-Palestinian independence. Are we going to see that much of a disciplined vote in American politics? I don't think so, especially because in the UK context, it was pretty clear Labour was going to win. In the American context, it's extremely close. And if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, you're going to end up with Donald Trump. And I don't think he's going to do anything particularly in favor of Muslims, either in America or abroad. So the other postulated October surprise is, of course, the hurricane. And personally, I don't understand why you would consider hurricane in Florida a surprise ever. Hurricanes in Florida go together like Frenchmen and frog legs. It's an extremely potent pairing. You can't think about one without thinking about the other. So I don't know why people would be like, oh my God, a hurricane happened in Florida. This is going to change everything politically. No, it's not. The only way that this would end up changing anything politically is if one side or another ended up really botching their response. And in such cases, it would only really be impactful in Florida anyway, which at this point is not a swing state, I would say. I'd say it's pretty solidly Republican, and it isn't in the running for really having an impact in the election overall. Certainly not like it used to be at the beginning of the millennium. So I don't think that the hurricane is really going to change anything. Of course, the hurricane is over now. It ended on the 12th, and we can see its little trajectory here. Just zipped right over central Florida and went off into the ocean. Although very interesting here, we have a rating of hurricane intensities in the last little while, and Milton was number 5. We had Wilma, 2005, Gilbert, 1988, Labor Day in 1939, and then Rita in 2005 again. That was a shitty year for hurricanes. 2005 was a really bad time. Anyway, I don't think that this is really going to matter at all. The one storm that people label as an October surprise, and you can say it was an October surprise, but I do think Obama was in a very comfortable position to win the 2012 election anyway, I can't remember what storm it was. There was some crazy storm. Hit New Jersey, and that's when Chris Christie was the governor of New Jersey, and Obama was there on the ground, and Chris Christie, let's get that fucking picture of those two losers. Anyway, that was 2012. He had this picture of these two goofballs coming in, and Chris Christie had a lot of good things to say about Obama, and supposedly that helped really put Obama over the edge and made a lot of his response to the storm, showed that he was the kind of guy who could get shit done and maintain a level head in a crisis. I don't know if this really changed the trajectory of that campaign, but it certainly helped Obama. I don't think there was a question of that in particular. Would he have lost without it? I think it's definitely up in the air. So I think from maybe a lot of people in the media and political class, there's a want to say that this storm is the October surprise, hearkening back to this 2012 election. The storm's not going to impact the election in any way, shape, or form, unless, like, in the upcoming election, somehow Kamala just totally shits the bed when it comes to the response to reconstruction and aid and everything else that the victims of the hurricane might need. I don't think it's going to happen personally. So I'm not too worried about that. And I'm not too worried about the hurricane really impacting the course of this election. So anyway, to wrap up this penultimate election prediction, I think that we're not going to really see huge, crazy October surprise watch. As soon as I post this, it's going to be like October surprise extreme. The one thing that maybe might be, who knows, I don't know if it's, again, going to really affect the campaign in America, was there was news today that Israel may have taken out the leader of Hamas. That would certainly be a game changer, at least for what's happening in the region. I don't think, again, it's going to affect the American campaign. But at this time, there's not enough confirmation to say whether or not it was really the guy. So I'm going to refrain from commenting on that, only that even if it was the guy, I don't think it's going to affect anything in terms of our political Super Bowl. And in terms of potential October surprises, I don't really see anything unless we're talking about real hand of God type of things, like successful assassination attempt on a candidate, health incident with a candidate, or some sort of major political catastrophe, an economic catastrophe, a war, those kind of stuff. But those kind of considerations, how likely are those things going to happen in the next couple weeks here? I think not very. So I think in terms of this October, we may have been surprised out. And with that, I think I can wrap up this episode. So I want to thank you guys for watching. I am very excited to be heading into the final stretch of this election season. I love having, like I mentioned, I love having election reaction events. I can't wait for the live stream. And I can't wait to see how it all shakes out, regardless of who wins. I don't know why. I always get excited about elections, and the bigger the better. Anyway, with that, this has been the Comrade signing off for now. Until next time, you guys take care.